Welcome everyone to Integrity Matters by Turnitin vidcast. I'm joined today by Michelle Cornford from Queensland University of Technology. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. You are Academic Integrity Officer at Health Faculty, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Before we talk about your role in a bit more detail, I'm always interested in knowing how and why did you get to work in education, and specifically with focus in academic integrity?
Yeah, so I sort of accidentally ended up in education. It wasn't sort of my original plan. So my background, originally I began studying paramedicine, and then I moved into public health. And my longer term goal originally was to eventually study medicine. So, but as many plans often change in life, my plan changed a little unexpectedly. So when I finished studying public health, I was asked to come and help to redesign a new unit, a QUT. And so I thought, well, that might be a great little thing to do for a semester and get a little bit of experience working in that sort of environment. So I helped to redesign that unit. And as a part of that work, that semester, I also taught in a couple of units. And very unexpectedly throughout that semester, I fell in love with teaching. So by the end of that semester, my plan to only be there for 6 months had changed, and I decided that I would hang around. So that was 9 years ago now. So yes, time has kind of flown. So I've taught at QUT for those 9 years in the School of Clinical Sciences and also the School of Public Health and Social Work. And it was almost 3 years ago now that I was approached and asked if I would like to take on the role of Academic Integrity Officer.
That's great. And you've been in this role for 3 years now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role specifically and why you decided to stay in academic integrity role?
Yeah, so when I first began in this role, the role was specifically for the School of Public Health and Social Work, which is one of the 7 schools that sits within the health faculty. So for the first 2.5 years, I was the Academic Integrity Officer for that one school. So the role has evolved a great deal in the time that I've been in this role. So initially, the role was sort of seen more as just a support type of role for academics because, dealing with academic misconduct cases is quite time consuming and involves a fair bit of paperwork. So that was the description that was given to me initially, was that I would sort of help to alleviate that burden on academics. And then as time went on, I began to, of course, learn far more about our systems here at QUT, and I also detected a few contract cheating cases. And so that's when I began to sort of see opportunity to develop the role further, and I became far more interested too in the investigation process. So during that 2.5 years, the role really evolved into one where the focus of my role was on investigating cases of misconduct, and particularly the more complex cases such as the contract cheating cases. I guess throughout that process, that in the evolution of the role, I just found myself becoming more and more passionate about the roles.
It's always great to hear, when someone speaks so passionately about the role and the job, and that they love what they do. But could you tell us, why academic integrity is important or should be taken as a priority?
Well, really, it's essential to the higher education process, and also just in terms of the assurance of the quality of our degrees, the quality of the professionals that are graduating at the end of their courses. Particularly if you consider my area being the health faculty. As of the beginning of this year, my role has changed somewhat, and I'm now the Academic Integrity Officer for the health faculty. So that's all 7 schools in the faculty. So, even if you just consider that in our faculty, we are graduating health professionals. So it's extremely important that as a university, we can be guaranteeing to the public and to employers that we are graduating students that have learnt the work, and that also one would hope that our health professional graduates would also be graduating with their own standards of integrity within their work, and also, personally and professionally.
Digging a little bit deeper into the role specifically, or your day-to-day work, what sort of challenges do you face on a daily basis? Is there anything that you would be wanting to share with our viewers?
Yes, I would say that the challenges are many. I think that one of the challenges that I could sort of mention briefly, I suppose, is the challenge of how to detect contract cheating quite specifically when we are dealing with online writing companies, where part of being able to sustain their business is to avoid detection, and to be able to offer a service, I suppose, to students where they sort of offer these guarantees. They'll give a plagiarism guarantee to a student. And I do know that students can be quite indignant when they've spent money purchasing an assessment only to then get called in to be interviewed about that assessment. So it's a bit of a sort of cat and mouse game, really, between those of us working in academic integrity and these online writing companies. So they're always trying to find out information, I think, about how are we detecting contract cheating so that they can then alter their business practices to make it harder for us to detect. So that's certainly one of the biggest challenges. Is I have seen changes in my time in this role of what the companies are doing. So it's always about who's sort of ahead of who, I think. So that's certainly a very big challenge.
And for those of our viewers who might not know what contract cheating is, would you mind expanding on the concept, on the idea of contract cheating, what it is and why it's so dangerous to academic integrity?
Yeah, so at QUT, our definition of contract cheating is that it is any time that a student engages with a third party in order to have that third party to complete their assessment for them, or in any way for them to obtain work which they then submit as their own work. So when they submit an assessment at QUT, they submit that assessment to Turnitin, and it includes a declaration there where they are declaring that this work is their own. So just to clarify, contract cheating is not just when a student is exchanging money or services for that assessment piece, but it involves any engagement with a third party. So that may be that the student is getting their roommate or a family member to help with the writing of their assignment. Contract cheating involves any involvement of that student with a third party to complete their assessment, which they then go on to submit as their own work.
How does QUT encourage or instill academic integrity in the students? Is there anything different that you're doing? What's your approach to teaching students about academic integrity?
Yeah, so we certainly do make it very clear in all of our online materials what our expectations are of students around academic integrity, and also our policies around how we deal with academic misconduct. This is, though, certainly an evolving process for us at QUT. So part of my job is not just in the investigation of suspected cases of misconduct, but it's also about educating staff and students. So our online materials do all contain information about our expectations, but we also educate students during lecture time and tutorial time as well on what those expectations are. So we do also offer support to students in terms of their academic writing and referencing. Our library offers support to students to help them with that. We also have writing clinics, and we also have what we call our student success group. So students that are perhaps identified as sort of being at risk in terms of their academic writing and referencing ability can be referred to that service where they'll receive one-on-one assistance to improve those skills.
And do you talk to students about academic integrity policy as part of this education?
Yes, we certainly do. And it's not just in terms of the students at that point, but at every point, if a student ends up being referred, if a student's assessment ends up being referred to me for investigation, I then have to determine whether or not that is going to be dealt with as minor or major misconduct. If it is considered to be minor misconduct at QUT is the provision of a one-on-one education session with that student where we explain in depth about our policies and our procedures, but we also provide them again with that education on how to write and reference in a way that means that hopefully I won't see them again for major misconduct in the future.
And switching gears a little bit, with unprecedented times where COVID-19 is still spreading, universities and institutions worldwide are going 100% online. Do you have any advice for educators about any steps they can take to protect academic integrity and reduce academic misconduct in this pretty much 100% online environment?
Yeah, so I really have two answers to that. I think the first is that we really need to be focused on engaging our students. So I think engagement is a little harder when we don't have that same peer-to-peer interaction that students have on campus. I think it's a little harder for all of us now too, that we're spending large amounts of time at home, so it's a little harder to be motivated to do what we need to do. And I think even those of us that are staff doing our jobs from home are experiencing that a little too. So I think that doing what we can to encourage engagement, so in ensuring that we're keeping those communication lines open with students. Certainly, I'm teaching at the moment using Zoom, which means that I can be interacting with my students, and the students can also be interacting with each other. So I think sort of thinking very carefully about how we can maximize engagement with our students. We also use discussion board on our Blackboard sites with our unit sites that also encourages engagement. So any assessment questions that students have, other students can see the questions and they can also see the answers. Of course, my other answer to that is just around assessment design. So sort of really thinking about the design of our assessments is just vital, I think, now that we are having to change, and we've changed all of our units now to online delivery, at least for the time being. So thinking about things like randomizing pools of questions to ensure that if students are sitting next to each other or in communication with each other when they're doing online exams, that they're not seeing the same set of questions, or perhaps not seeing those questions in the same order. And of course, designing authentic learning and authentic assessment. Designing assessment where students really need to use their clinical reasoning, are really demonstrating the learning in that particular unit in order to be able to answer those questions, as opposed to questions that perhaps if a student, could access the information online, or even sort of questions that could be answered to a reasonable extent just from general knowledge. So I think very carefully designing those questions and thinking about what sort of knowledge are we really testing here in that type of assessment design.
So to sum up, engagement and assessment design are crucial to help educators prevent or help prevent academic misconduct. And what sort of advice would you have for students?
Yes, so I've got a fair bit of advice for students, I think. I might just break that up into two. So I might just start with the advice that I've got for students in terms of our online delivery now and how to best adapt to that. I think that encouraging students to communicate with their lecturers and their tutors. So to not be thinking that we have disappeared just because we're online, that we are still able to be contacted and that we do still welcome questions from students. I think also too, using the different forms of communication that we have available, whether it be organising a Zoom session or organising a phone call, or using the discussion board or emailing us, there's multiple different ways that they can stay engaged, and I guess to encourage students to be engaged with their learning. I think too, scheduling their study time, scheduling set times that you sit down and you say, okay, well, I'm going to work on this unit for this time. So I think making a plan to be engaged in their studies is really important. I think also too, not leaving assessment to the last minute. I mean, that's advice that I give to students regardless of whether it's face-to-face delivery or online delivery. But, I think that it becomes a little tempting to do the wrong thing when pressure is high and stress is high and you've got an assessment due very, very soon. So I think planning that time out and beginning, breaking the assessment down into sections and then planning your time of when you will work on those various sections is really important. So my other advice to students more generally around academic integrity is that I believe and feel very strongly that we all need to have personal integrity standards that we have made a personal decision that we will adhere to, that we will keep in our lives. And I think that applies both professionally as well as personally. I really feel that if we have standards that we have thought through in advance and that we have decided that we will maintain those standards personally, that when opportunities arise where we could cheat at something, or when we're perhaps talking to another student or a friend who says, yes, but I've decided to do this, why don't you do the same thing? It just makes life easier. I think having those predefined standards that we have agreed upon within ourselves means that when those opportunities and those moments arise, that I think it's easier to say no and easier to make the right choice than perhaps if we've never thought about, what sort of standards we would like to live by.
This is certainly invaluable advice. Has your role changed at all in light of the changes that came with COVID-19 situation?
It has changed a little, and I would say that I think we haven't yet been online long enough yet for me to fully explain what all those changes are going to be. So I'm still getting used to doing my job a little differently. Certainly when it comes to interviewing students in relation to suspected cases of academic misconduct, those investigations are now occurring online, so via Zoom. That changes things as well. That also applies to our academic misconduct committee meetings as well. So students are free to be present at those meetings as they always were in the past, but that also now has to take place via Zoom. I think in terms of the investigation process at this point in time, that still appears to be the same as it always was. But this is an evolving situation. So, yes, we'll see as the months unfold.
Michelle, if you had a magic wand and you could do anything you wanted to change in your, in at QUT or in academic integrity area, what would that be?
If I had a magic wand, it would be to engage all staff and students to be passionate about academic integrity. So that is in terms of their personal and professional integrity standards, as well as engaging staff in being passionate about deterring academic misconduct, as well as detecting academic misconduct, and also engaging our students that are very passionate about doing the right thing, to be engaged as well in detecting cases of academic misconduct. So we want everybody to be involved because we believe at QUT that academic integrity is everybody's business.
So what are you most proud of currently within your role, within your job? You know, like I can clearly see that you are super passionate about what you do. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're so passionate about this?
I think after years of teaching into multiple different degrees, that working in this role has really led me to that realization that it's impossible to care deeply about educating students, but not also care deeply about academic integrity. I think too that in the first semester of working in this role, that the more that I was exposed to cases of academic misconduct, the more that it really hit home to me just how much academic misconduct undermines every facet of what we are doing as an educational institution. I think that's really where my passion has come from, is just realizing that I was already a very passionate educator, and that realizing that goes hand in hand with being deeply passionate about academic integrity.
And was there anything that really surprised you when you took on the role of academic integrity officer, outside of, you know, how academic misconduct can undermine what QUT does as an academic institution? Is there anything that really struck you? Like, did you have a moment of, this is insane?
Yes, definitely. And that's actually a very easy question to answer. The most shocking aspect of it for me has been learning what I have learned about these online writing companies that target students directly, and that particularly target students at their most vulnerable times, when they're stressed, when they've got multiple assessments due, the ways that they advertise to students as well, the mediums, online mediums that they use to advertise to students. I think also just learning so much more about their business structure and the way that they operate. You know, this is big business, and I think that was really the most shocking part of it for me. I think also seeing cases, you know, where students are being blackmailed by these companies, and you know, having these companies make contact with me in order to provide information about students purchasing assignments online. You know, I didn't expect any of that. I didn't expect to come across that. So, and you know, certainly in my prior years of being an educator before I moved into this role, I really had no idea that these online writing companies were functioning the way that they did. Yeah, so that's been the biggest shock for me.
And do you think that as a higher education university sector in Australia, you know, we are taking contract cheating as seriously as we should be?
I don't think we are yet. I think I get the impression that this is really an emerging area, and that includes, you know, in terms of educators' awareness of the problem. I don't think that educators are yet fully aware across the board of just how much of an issue this is. And I think too that that's a part of my role, is to educate lecturers and tutors that this is really a growing issue. I mean, with our text matching software now, of course, we have dealt quite well with our issue of plagiarism. You know, students are very aware now that when their assignment is put through this software, that it will identify if they have pasted their content off the internet.
At QUT, do you call out contract cheating as a specific academic misconduct area? And does it have any penalties that are different to other academic misconduct behaviors?
So here at QUT, we do take contract cheating very seriously, and we have a very well-defined definition of contract cheating in our policies and procedures manual. And the penalty for contract cheating, even for a first offence, in the absence of any other history of academic misconduct, is exclusion from the university for 6 months, so for one semester, at which time then the student has the opportunity to return to study after that time. So we certainly do take contract cheating very seriously, and I think the penalty at QUT for contract cheating makes that clear, just how seriously we do take this particular form of academic misconduct. In terms of our processes, so a part of my role is to educate markers on how to detect the signs that contract cheating may have occurred. So I educate markers and unit coordinators on how to detect the signs of contract cheating. And if a marker happens to notice any of those signs during the marking of the assessment, then that assessment is referred to me for further investigation. So my role then is to assess those particular signs that the marker has noted, and then for me to investigate to see if I can find evidence that contract cheating has occurred. So that may include interviewing the student. It also, may include using the other software that I have available to me from Turnitin to then look for other signs that contract cheating has happened. So the interview with the student is also a very important part of that process. So once I've completed my investigation, if I am satisfied that on the balance of probability that contract cheating has taken place, I then prepare that case and all of the evidence to then be submitted to the faculty's governance team, and that case is then heard by the Academic Misconduct Committee, who then makes a determination on the evidence that I've submitted.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and hopefully we'll get to chat again soon. This is it for today's episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Bye-bye.